So in the middle of the end of chapter 28, the end of the mimer, 7th mimer, and going into chapter 29. We'll see how far we go. In Ayin Beis, volume 1, page 46, which is the conclusion of the Chukas mimer. But let's just sum up chapter 28. So the last 11 chapters, from Yud Ches, Chav Ches, from 18 to 28, was a full sugya. It's a full, complete subject matter. It began, which is itself a subset of what was discussed earlier. So Perek Yud Ches, if you go back, and of course it's critical to see the whole flow, because Perek Yud Ches begins by Inyan Hu. This Inyan ends at the end of 28. Just for the record. I'm saying it because when you learn Chassidus, you learn these individual maamarim. Rarely do you find something that goes for 29, let's say here. We're talking about literally almost 40 pages. Almost 16, 17 pages. So it's good to break it down. Ayin Beis in general needs to be dissected. So the point in chapter 18 was the following. He's in the middle of establishing the difference between Eir and Keli. That Eir is transcendent in nature, or B'Lashon Chassidus Me'ein HaMoyer. So Eir gives us a taste of what godliness is like. Keli describes maybe what God wants, describes existence, and even an existence that's aligned, but it doesn't give us a taste of godliness, Elokus, Bittel, Ares von sich, Afshata, meaning, everything about going beyond self. A Keli, in Atzilus, a Keli has no ego. But a Keli could have an ego if it's not aware of its source. Eir can never have an ego. It's just not capable. The whole existence of Eir is a reflection of its source. Now, of course, through Shtalshlus, Eir comes through many gradations and diminishments, so you don't have it in full intensity. Eir Lifnei Tzimtzum doesn't let anything exist except Elokus. That's why there's the Tzimtzum. So now that allows, diminished Eir allows for another reality. But, the example Chassidus gives that when the teacher begins to teach, after he concealed his idea, and there's a transmission of a kav, meaning a transmission of knowledge to the student, now the student can exist. It's not just the teacher. There's another individual here who's a beginner, and you spoon feed him step by step by step, like that's what the kav does. But what he's being taught is bittul. He's being trained in the art of learning. It's not all about him. So the fact that there was room left for the student, which is what the Tzimtzum does, can be misunderstood by the student. They're thinking, I'm a geser mitzias now. I'm like I have a self, which can lead to a world like ours, which is an agnostic world that denies there's altogether a source. But like the Rabbi bring the mashal, like the father that hides from the child in order for the child to be ingenious enough to find him. And then the child stops looking, decides there's no one there. That, of course, is a great tragedy. Because the whole concealment was only for you to be there, for you to find me. Not for you to go off on your own.
Never cried like that.
Right. And then the father cries.
Agnostic means exactly what...
Agnostic means a world where you can deny God's existence. An atheist is a person who says there is no God. Agnostic says he's not sure.
He doesn't ask questions.
No, he asks, but he doesn't have a conclusion. Agnostic universe really means a universe where you can say either way. God left Haretza Lites Yita. That's agnostic. Haretza Lites Yita. You can obviously. I'm not saying Kedusha, but we live in a world where you could say Ani v'ahav si'ed. You don't need a raya. People do. Even people who believe in God is a shayla exactly what's going on. But let me go back here. So the student is now receiving a transmission. So he's getting Eir, which is what knowledge is. Transcendence. So Eir is transcendent. So what he's discussing, when he starts in Perek Yud Ches to discuss, is exactly what happens to this Eir. If the Eir goes through a fundamental Tzimtzum, then maybe it lost its properties. Maybe it no longer has transcendence. It's not quite like the Kelim. But that's the struggle here. The dilemma in Perek Yud Ches is if Eir is affected by the Havaya, he brings proof. The Eitz Chaim says that he could not have had a Tzimtzum and just left the kav. He actually proves from that. What's the Havamina that you should leave the kav? Right? He says, if the kav is bleak vul, what would help if you left the kav? So he proves from that by the question of the Eitz Chaim that this was a consideration that would have left the kav, is that the kav is proof that the kav is shorshe begvul. And that's why there's a havamina, there's a consideration that you should have just left the kav, which would have left finite energy, but his conclusion is not like that. Right, exactly. In the havamina. Because if according to the other opinion, which is not the opinion in this hemshech, that the kav is rooted in bleak vul, there's no consideration. How could you even leave a kav? The kav is bleak vul. The kav is a part of the Eid bleak vul. But since the kav has its unique root in Eid HaGvul, so to speak, whatever Eid HaGvul means, we're talking about shir atzmei, as he's going to explain later. So that gives a consideration. It says, answer is, so why then was a complete tzimtzum? He says, for the containers. But then he asks the question, if that's the case, top of page 29. But Bapoyel Mamash, now the kav came after a complete tzimtzum. So you have to say the tzimtzum was also in the kav. That's why it's a narrow kav. So ask the question. So back. If that's the case, the tzimtzum affected the kav too, and the kav now. So how could you say the kav is gilia helam from its root after the tzimtzum? Kalim, we understand are yesh ma'ayin, meaning they're infinitely distant. But the kav, now that the kav went through the tzimtzum, even though the kav is rooted in the 10 hidden spheres, but the tzimtzum should have impacted it. And that becomes the whole discussion for these 10 chapters to answer that. The answer is that there's two effects of the tzimtzum. He continues, you have to say that it's rooted in the hidden spheres. You have to say that the be'emes ein adem tzimtzum de'erei and sof. No, two poolas. You keep saying this is not Shulchan Aruch. You cannot be medayik in a line. You have to understand context because you're not there. Shulchan Aruch, you can look. Is it a tzitzit? Is it a talis? Here, there's no way to observe this. The only way we know is what we're told. He does not say that at all. He says, "Be'emes ein adem tzimtzum de'erei and sof." That means, what does it mean? That ein adem the poolas hat tzimtzum. Not that there's two tzimtzumim. It's clear that it's not two tzimtzumim. Because the whole point is he's talking about the same tzimtzum. He's talking about the tzimtzum in Eitz Chaim. If he said, in another place in Kabbalah there's another tzimtzum, it's another discussion. He's talking about, that's why I said that the Frierdiker Rebbe, he writes Purulus tzimtzum. There's no question he means Purulus tzimtzum. Well, anyway, let me speak it out. If you have a different approach, we're here we can be mefalpel in it. I'll explain as I understand it. So he says, so therefore, you have to say that Ein Adema, because he has a question now. Which one is it? The kav is rooted in 10 hidden spheres, no problem. Based on that, you could say the kav, which is after the tzimtzum, is only gilia helam, only revealing that which was concealed through the tzimtzum. But the tzimtzum was a complete tzimtzum that completely radically changed the whole reality. It concealed everything, concealed the whole light, including the sefirot agnuzos. So here he's adding that you have to say, be'emes, you can't compare the effect of the tzimtzum in general, meaning for the kelim, the complete siluk, and the effect of the tzimtzum on the root of the kav. So the primary thing of the tzimtzum was in order for the containers to emerge, as he continues in the parentheses.
Look at the last two lines before the keser.
Let me finish the presentation. You want to argue? You're going to have to present a full case. You can't just you could either have a question or you have another way to explain the whole thing. Remember that. It's easy to look at lines. You're going to either have to ask something or you're going to have to present a different way of explaining the whole thing. To me, it makes complete sense what I'm saying right now. Anyway, continues on and says that according to the opinion that the kav is rooted in bleak vul. I'm back in chapter 18 now. I'm going all the way to the end of the parentheses. Huh? Yeah. Almost to the bottom.
Last line.
Yeah. That according to that opinion, then clearly the tzimtzum is b'derech siluk, also for the kav. Because the kav is rooted in bleak vul, and there's no way that it can be later manifest in containers if there's no siluk. But he says, yeah. L'fi mavur kan l'shita anal, the sheresh hakav meses v'yisagnus is ein ina tzimtzum dem l'zeh. But according to the opinion that the kav is rooted in the hidden spheres, you have to say that Tzimtzum is not similar to what affects the kav and how it affects the containers, the root of the containers. The Tzimtzum shebe'eseh b'chinas siluk v'sal masagam hashem about Tzimtzum b'asheresh makar hakav. That Tzimtzum in the Ein Sof has to, for the bligvul, had to be completely concealed. The Tzimtzum b'asheresh hakav is only in a form of diminishment, and then becomes the Inyan Hu. To understand that, he goes into the whole explanation of the 10 hidden spheres, what's their nature and personality, and explains it with the two examples of the Beis and the Sichlim, and then comes back in the end of chapter 28 that we learned yesterday to sum up this Nekuda. So once you understand that the sefirot agnuzus, as he explains, are not even real spheres altogether. He said clearly, he said at the beginning of your test, as we learned, they're not gnuzus as in concealed, waiting to be like just a matter of relatively being revealed. But they're klulim, they're not even a mitzvahs there. And he got all the explanations of how he explained the hidden spheres. And by explaining it, and explaining it with the example, we can then come back and understand what he said here, that there is a distinction. I asked yesterday the question, I was wrong, because I asked, according to the opinion that the kav is rooted in bligvul, would it also be silik? He says clearly in chapter 18, yes. So I want to just clarify that. But according to the opinion that he's discussing here, that the kav is rooted in Eir HaGvul, which means basically that in the artist's mind, he envisioned 10 spheres. Also Eiris, not 10 Kalim, also an Eir, also energy. And then you have to say that the kav's impact, the Tzimtzum's impact on those Esser spheres are a diminishment, not a siluk. And the siluk is only regarding the bligvul energy that preceded the Sfiras Ein Ket, so to speak. So basically, what I'm saying is there's no Tzimtzum b'derech siluk in the bligvul, and then you have left is Esser Sfiras Agnuzis, and then you have another Tzimtzum b'derech miyut. What I'm saying is it's one Tzimtzum addition that happens after the Esser Sfiras Agnuzis, and it has one impact on the Eir HaBligvul, has another impact on the Eir HaGvul, and has a third impact in order for the Kalim to emerge. He doesn't say the third impact, but if you really break it down, that's how I would understand the pshat here. Or else you get yourself a very complicated discussion of a Tzimtzum addition before the Tzimtzum addition, which nowhere hinted anything like that, and the Rashab can't be changing what it says in Eitz Chaim. At the end of the day, it's all based on the Eitz Chaim. The whole chapter Yud Ches is based on Eitz Chaim. Now, one second. Either you have a question, or you have an alternative explanation, or you agree. There's no fourth option, correct?
I have an alternative explanation. Just based on what
okay. No. But remember, based on what he says, he's basing it on Eitz Chaim. He can't be contradicting his source.
He's not contradicting Eitz Chaim. When Eitz Chaim says that there was one Tzimtzum that's siluk, he's talking about the Tzimtzum, the first Tzimtzum. The Rebbe Shabbos is saying that there was also another Tzimtzum after that. He's not contradicting it.
After what?
He's saying what Eitz Chaim is discussing.
Hold on. The Eitz Chaim is Tzimtzum addition that Eilin Sof memaleh kol hametzias, which means everything. Esses for Sagnuzis, Bligvul, and everything. There's a Tzimtzum addition, then a Kav emerged. Tell us where the Rebbe Rashab is placing another Tzimtzum.
It's not the same type of Tzimtzum.
Doesn't matter. Where is he placing this other Tzimtzum?
After the first Tzimtzum, what was left is the Esses Sagnuzis.
I just gave you a picture of what it says in Eitz Chaim. I'm asking, where's the Rebbe Rashab placing another Tzimtzum? Before or after? There's Eilin Sof memaleh kol hametzias. Let's get that clear. Eilin Sof memaleh kol hametzias, he makes it very clear, has a sheresh hagvul, sheresh habligvul. Okay? Then comes a Tzimtzum addition that conceals everything. That we know. Then comes a Kav. So where's the Rebbe Rashab? This is what says in Eitz Chaim. Where's the Rebbe Rashab, in your opinion, placing another Tzimtzum? If he is.
The Kav is rooted in the Esses Sagnuzis, and that's where it's emanating from. Right, and the second Tzimtzum is just like the Gili Mehalim Gili, which is.
So where is the Tzimtzum? So in other words,
it's just a diminished.
Doesn't matter. Where is this? Where is this happening? When is it happening? Where is it happening? I gave you 3 steps.
At the beginning of the Kav.
That's a Tzimtzum addition.
No, the Tzimtzum edition was left after the Tzimtzum edition was left as a series like Moses, which is the Derech Hashanah. It says right here.
And don't tell me what it says. You say you have. You can't. You don't. Maybe you don't understand what it says. Remember that. That's also possible. So don't bring what. I just asked you a question. Eitz Chaim gave a picture. You have another alternative picture. Say it. Do you understand anyone another alternative here? I don't even know what another alternative would be. The only other alternative it could be is that there's a tzimtzum b'derech siluk lifnei a tzimtzum addition. That's what you want to say, but it's impossible that that's what he means. You want to say it's like this: the Eid Ein Sof applicable, tzimtzum b'derech siluk. So now you have the sefirot agnuzis on its own, and now there's another tzimtzum b'derech miyut that makes the kav. Is that what you want to say? It cannot be. It's a steer completely to Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim says that tzimtzum addition, that siluk happens after sefirot agnuzis, not before. So how could the Rebbe Rashab contradict that? The kav comes after the tzimtzum addition for sure, right? What you want to say is the kav doesn't come after the tzimtzum addition. The kav comes after another tzimtzum diminishment. The tzimtzum addition happened before.
No, the kav comes after the tzimtzum addition, but it's rooted over there.
But tzimtzum addition is a siluk, that's for sure. Eitz Chaim says the tzimtzum addition is a siluk. If the kav comes after a siluk, which he says clearly in chapter 18, how do you explain that?
It starts in that it's like Moses, according to that shita. That's the whole thing that Rebbe Rashab is saying.
I don't. Okay, honestly, I don't understand what you're saying. I don't. I have no idea what you're saying. Do you? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I have to hear more what
because
saying.
The Rebbe Rashab is saying it is a shita that it starts.
Maybe he has more what to say. You have more explanation, more idea, that you want to present an idea.
He keeps on saying that. That's
He's trying to find words. I'm trying to ask you to explain it, not bringing words. You can't bring words into something because you may have misunderstood the words and just get yourself now locked in the way you misunderstood it. So maybe you didn't understand it right. I'm just trying to, we're learning something here. If there's another way to look at it, I'm more than happy to understand another way of looking at it. I cannot see another way of looking at it. No. Forget about what he says. I asked you to explain it in context of chapter Yudches, where everything begins. It's not Shulchan Aruch. You can't bring a line here. You have to explain the picture. Based on your understanding of the Maimon, how do you explain the picture?
That the kav starts from the essence.
Nothing starts. The kav is rooted in the Eid HaGvul, which is the essence of Agnuzis, which as we learn, is there are no spheres there. There's nothing there. All it is God envisioning 10 spheres. The kav is rooted there. But there's a tzimtzum between those two. That tzimtzum between those two is a tzimtzum addition b'derech siluk, whether you like it or not. That's what he says in chapter 18. The question is, what does it do to the kav? Is the tzimtzum b'derech siluk affecting the kav in eifin of siluk, or is it affecting the kav in eifin of miyad? That's the thing. But he's not making another tzimtzum. The question is how it impacts it. If you look at chapter 18, it's very clear. How does it impact the kav? So
exactly affecting the kav, like the way. What kind of kav is this?
Yes.
If it's b'derech siluk, so then what's it?
Then the kav is right, exactly. Then it would have to be completely concealed. If it's not b'derech siluk, then the kav is really revealing the 10 hidden spheres that were there before.
And the maskonis has both.
No, the maskonis depends which opinion. There's two opinions in Kabbalah. There's two opinions. He says there's two shittas.
Back to the question, because Gili Halavi,
okay.
The question we have, should we have Yishmayin, about the kav? If it's b'derech siluk, so then it's Yishmayin. It should be Yishmayin.
It is, but according to that opinion, it is Yishmayin.
But according to the opinion of the shita that it's rooted in.
It's not Yesh. It's Gili Helam. That means the kav. That means the tzimtzum addition. That's b'derech siluk on the Eid HaBligvul. For the Sheresh HaKav is only diminishing it. The same tzimtzum.
It's diminishing. It's not b'derech siluk.
So that's the machlekes.
Anyway, what we're talking about. Let's continue on because I don't. If you have a position, you're going to have to elaborate more, think about it, and present it because I don't really understand another way of looking at it. I don't see an alternative way to explain this. To be very honest, what do you ask me? There's two shittas. One is the Eid HaKav rooted in the Bligvul, and it's just like that, or is it rooted in Eid HaGvul?
So it completely carries with itself the hidden spheres?
What?
So then it carries in itself the whole idea.
So the question is, so there's two opinions. There's another opinion that the Esser Spheres Agnuzis are the root of the Kelim, not the root of the Eiris. Eid is Bligvul, basically. Yeah. And so in that opinion, the Rabbi Rashab says clearly, for there to be an existence, independent reality, you have to completely conceal. The Eitz Chaim makes it clear you need a tzimtzum b'derech siluk. You cannot leave a kav. That you understand?
Yes.
Why? Because if you left even one drop of air, existence could not emerge. The kalim could not emerge. So now's the question. How could there be a consideration even that there would be left anything? So the Rebbe Rashab is bringing a proof. The fact that the Eitz Chaim even has a havamin, a consideration that there would be left, means that the kav is not rooted in bli gvul, it's rooted in the eir hagvul. That's why there's a havamin that it would be left alone. In other words, the tzimtzum would not be complete. The tzimtzum would be everything, but just leaving a kav. There's no siluk. Yes, you'd leave that eir hagvul. It's like now the teacher doesn't have to become completely silent. He just pushes everything aside, the bli gvul, and just leaves the eir hagvul. That would be like the example I gave of a teacher who's teaching, and instead of teaching everything in a big flow, he pushes all his things and he's just giving you a stream. Instead of complete silence, which is a Tzimtzum addition, and then comes the stream. You understand the distinction? And we learned this earlier. I'm really going over something. Understand, what is your question here? I just want
to know the basics.
This is the basics. The Eitz Chaim asked this question. Why didn't he just leave a kav? Instead he concealed everything, and then came a kav. That question, you understand? So Rabbi Rashab concludes from that question that the consideration to leave a kav means that the kav was able to be left and would not have destroyed existence. So you have to say the kav is rooted in a eir hagvul, not eir bli gvul. Because if the kav is just the same quality as eir bli gvul, you're just leaving a little of it, it qualitatively will not let existence to be. So this proves that the kav has a root in eir hagvul. But you still needed a complete tzimtzum, because you need the containers to emerge. The question in this whole chapters is, what effect does this tzimtzum have on the kav now? This kav that emerged, that is really a revealing of the 10 hidden spheres. What impact did the tzimtzum have? If there was a complete concealment also on the kav, then you have back to square one. You have that the kav is also yesh ma'ayim. And he wants to establish here that Eir is Gilia Helam and has some relationship with what's going on before the Tzimtzum. As I said before, you could argue, let's put it in more simple English. Human beings have a nature of transcendence. We want to transcend. We're not satisfied with animal bliss, and we're just living like a cow grazing in a field and just eating and taking care of our needs. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe says, "A behemoth kemel the shamayim nish gesehen, a behemoth kemel the himmel gesehen." An animal never saw heaven. We can look up. So su mora meinechem v'rumi bara ela. We have what's called ner Hashem nishmasadim, like a ner. It's always going up. We're restless. This transcendence expresses itself in every part of life, even in science, in free inquiry, in curiosity. We look up to the sky. We want to know other life on other planets. We build billion-dollar industry just to find out what's going on the moon and in the solar systems and the galaxies. All because human beings. Animals don't do this. Human being is a transcendent creature. So the way we understand it, very simple, is like he says in Parshat Chukas, since God infused in this offer, which offer on its own is not transcendent. It's affected by gravity. Once you put nishmas adam, which is nivra b'tzalmenu kidmusenu, b'tzelem Elokim, the divine image, we have a personality of not being satisfied with just plain material life. We want something more. Now, you could ask any person on earth, everybody wants something more. Some people call it romance and love and poetry and music and art. Some people call it religion and spirituality. It's all the search for transcendence. That's a human part of human nature. You could make an argument, I'm just applying this in real life, that transcendence is a human thing. It's like what I said before Matan Torah. Yeah, you can reach, but you're not going to reach the ultimate. You can only reach a human being. We're all mortals. We're all going to die. We all have limitations. Just like you can't fly in the sky, you can only jump up that high. So spiritually, you can reach a certain transcendent level, but you cannot reach the source. You can make such an argument. So from a spiritual perspective, you could argue, and some Kabbalim actually argued, we never can reach God. Because God is a completely different reality. You want to reach God, you can know. If I knew Him, I'd be Him. The argument could be, Chassidus makes it very clear that Aqdas Hashem and all the different proofs, that the whole point of Chassidus is that God does want us to become connected with Him directly. And not just with His Giluyim or Seder Shtalshlus. We're not just connecting to memaleh kalam, but also sovev kalam. In other words, transcendence goes all the way to the top. But then that makes it much more complicated. If you don't have to go all the way to the top, okay, humans reach as much as they can, and they go on, move on. If you go all the way to the top, you're dealing with a major problem. Atzmus and all his giluyim are so distant from us, as far as we keep saying, Yesem Yishayin Areich, Asir L'Gabad Tzilus, as distant and infinitely distant Asir L'Gabad Tzilus, Atzilus is compared to the Ein Sof. So we're talking here, to get that Tzilus is a whole Aved. And they tell us now you can get the Ein Sof, which is completely beyond it all. This is basically the major dilemma of all of Kabbalah and Chassidus, how this happens. So different Kabbalim have different opinions on the matter. Some say that you can have transcendence, but you have to give up your tzir. You have to give up some of your identity. Because you can't remain your identity and be connected to something that's beyond identity. Some say the other way around. You can stay in your identity, but you can't connect all the way to the top. The other way. You want it in your kelim? Fine, your kelim are fine, but it can't be, you're not going to have the total, utter transcendence. In different aces, what I just said are the two opinions that I talked about here. Does Eid have in it transcendence, or does Eid does not have? I'm sorry, no. Does Eid have in it tziyur, or not? If Eid are pshutim, then the argument would be, you want to reach Eid, you're going to have to become pashut. You cannot remain in your identity and your individuality and experience such high transcendence. You can experience transcendence, but it's going to be on kelim level. That's one opinion. That opinion would be something like, I'm simplifying it because there are more opinions than two, but that would be like the opinion that the shape of things happens in the container level. Like the color, exactly. The colorless water, liquid, in colorful glass, in tinted glass. So the liquid is not affected, fundamentally. It just looks like it is. So you want your chesed to be intact, you can't. You're going to have to. You cannot reach pure eir, and that's why there's a Tzimtzum b'derech siluk. That whole dimension is completely concealed from us, because for us to exist, none of it can remain. The Rebbe Rashab, based really on the Yesodus of Chassidus Chabad, does not satisfied with that. In Samach Vov, he leans more in that direction, but in Ayin Beis, he goes more in the direction that we want to have transcendence and still we want to have our cake and eat it too. Let's put it this way: we want to have our tzir, which means the tzir that comes from kelim, but we also want to have the transcendence from before the tzimtzum all the way to asmus. So how's that possible? That's the dilemma. That's much more complicated. It's like the other way, okay, you have to go out of yourself to go there. Remember, even according to this shit, you also have to go out of yourself. Ego never works. We're not talking about ego and yeshus. Yeah. The question, however, is how much of a... Now, so by establishing that the kav is rooted, the kav, which is Eir first of all, no, by establishing that the kav is Eir HaGvul, not Eir Bli Gvul. That the kav actually has within it 10 spheres, like he makes a very strong case before chapter 18. That the kav has within Eir Pnimi, that there's fundamentally, this is the whole beginning of the Hemshech, that there's a thing called fundamental Eir Pnimi. It's not that the keches hanefesh, the example, not the faculties of the soul are Bli Gvul. And when they enter the eye, suddenly the power of vision is like the liquid that has no color entered into a colorful thing. No. Before it enters the eye, it also has a personality. Yeah. However, obviously it's not a personality like a physical eye. But it has parameters. It has some type of koach hariyah in the nefesh is distinct from koach hashmiyah in the nefesh. Exactly. It's so posher that you can't see the difference. So once you establish, that means there's essentially Eir Pnimi has a root all the way in the etzem. That's the point. Eir Pnimi is not just a result of diminished Eir Sovev. In other words, it's not just everything is. It's not like the sunlight. For example, sunlight just shines. It shines on a garbage pile, in a house, in a palace. Yeah, you can channel the sunlight by sunglasses or laser beams or whatever. But the sun on its own, so if someone will say to you, when the sun shines, for example, it affects a solar panel and creates solar energy? No, our kalim, the sun on its own would never create anything. The sun does its thing, it makes things grow, it illuminates, it warms the earth. It's Eir Makif. It doesn't have Eir Pnimi in it. The sun does not fit, like the nefesh fits the eye, the koach hariyah goes into the eye. the koach hashmiya goes into the airs. The sun does not have that type of, it's not an air pnimi. I'm just giving an example. You follow?
No, but ich habe verstanden von dir verkehrt. In the way I understood you, you're saying basically that keach hariyeh shel neshama is not keach hashmiya shel neshama.
Exactly, and the sun is not like that. And I'm giving an example. The sun is not like that. The sun is not like that. No. And the sun is not like that. The sun just shines.
Okay.
The sun is like the colorless liquid. The sun just shines. You want to use it, you can use it for your things. You can tap into it, you can use a magnifying glass, you can create energy from it, solar power, whatever. But the sun on its own just shines. So that's more like the shita, that the air shines, the kelim create the shape. But according to what he's saying in this whole hemshach, that air pnimi is fundamentally air pnimi, then even the air has in it an identity. So climbing up the... One second, first we're talking Atzilus. If in Atzilus those areas have identity, then the kav has to have an identity. Because where did it get it from? It's not getting it from the containers. It has it fundamentally. So it must be getting it from the nefesh, from the soul. So it gets it from the kav. So you have to say, according to this, that the kav has in it some very amorphous, very dakasdik, but it has something. And we're not talking about hisavus ha'er nasa kelim. We're not talking about the thickness of the energy in order to create kelim. We're talking about there's an eir ha'chesed. There's klei ha'chesed, there's an eir ha'chesed. And he makes a case, you're going to have to learn the Maimorim to see it in depth. He makes a strong case for this, proves it every possible way. He proves it with Shammai and Hillel. That the fact that Shammai and Hillel heard Shmai v'Avtalya, and this one heard Chesed, this one heard Gvura, this one heard it's Osir, this one is Mutter, where did it come from? So he says that the Seichel has the potential of Chesed and Gvura, not just the Kelim, the personality of Shammai, because Shammai, they can't distort what they heard from their Rav. They have to say that Shmai v'Avtalya, when they spoke, it was so hafshotadik, it included an interpretation according to Chesed, and included interpretation according to Gvura. In the Kelim of Shammai and Hillel, it came into that way. But then he goes on and says, that's why there's a chlifa d'chtayu. He proves from this. Because sometimes Shammai paskins l'kula. Why? How is that possible? Because the Eir has to be, because he proves it, that's also in the Eir. Anyway, so climbing the ladder backwards, the Kav has now. If the Kav has, where does the Kav get it from? So that's where he answers that the Kav is rooted in the Esesphere Sagnuzes. That means even Lifnei Tzimtzum, there has to be subtle in the vision of the artist. In other words, you could argue like this, that the artist has infinite possibilities of creating art. And one of the infinite happens to be the one he created. But there's nothing defined about it. It's like the Eir HaShemesh, that just can do anything, and it happens to manifest in that way. I'm not saying you could really explain it, but just theoretically. The answer is no. That there's actually another dimension, that the Eir HaBligvul, Lifnei HaTzimtzum, meaning the vision of the divine vision, which is infinite, Spheres Einketz, not 10 billions, infinite spheres. And even each sphere could have been in a different way. Then it arose in his will. Again, not then in a level, it's not in time, it's in concept. Shiras mebekeach, that I want to have a structured existence. This structure of existence is not a peripheral side note. It's not derech agav. This is the world that we have. And he keeps saying that. Is exactly the way that God wants it. That means in God, in Atzmus, Eir Pnimi is Iker, not a Tofel. It's not like, I want to express myself. And you figure out how you're going to be Makabel me. I know I want an existence, and like the nefesh. In the nefesh itself, there's keches, there's eris, there's keches hanefesh that have somewhere some type of personality. You cannot see it. When you open up a nefesh, it's not made up of parts. The nefesh is completely pshitus, but it has within it the ability of a very defined. And this opinion, which is the opinion he chooses in this hemshech, and follows all the time. He qualifies. He keeps referring to the other opinion. It's very clear that he wants to have transcendence with tzir. There's nothing to talk about. Basically, he wants both the two opposites. What we learned yesterday, the end of the Perek, Kav has two opposites. It's Kav Hamida. It's shaping existence. It's shaping parameters, but the same Kav, the same one, is also uniting them. So it's the force that divides, also is the force that connects. It's clear.
So according to what kind of Tzimtzum was it?
So according to this, so here it gets complicated. According to the opinion that the Eir is bligvul no matter what, and never has any spheres in it, any Eir HaChesed, etc. So then Siluk is very simple. It's Tzimtzum b'derech Siluk. It affected everything. Everything before the Tzimtzum had to be concealed and geendigt. And now you have a new reality, existence. Now you have a kav. Yeah, even according to that, of course, the kav is bringing something from before the Tzimtzum, that's clear. But you can't find a commonality between the kav and before the Tzimtzum except that it's transcendence. You don't have in the kav anything from the essence of the based on that opinion. It's all siluk. But if the kav does have something, and this is the back and forth, like min konof, he keeps saying, like konof atzme, min konof. Kelim, he said, is not even min konof. Kelim are bechlal a concealment. But here you have the tzitzis. They're coming from the beged, they're made from the same material of the beged, but they're not the beged. So you see how it's like back and forth. And the bottom line is that the kav becomes now an agent of two things. One, that it's bringing us the ability to enter into kelim, into identity, but it retains its very powerful transcendent element. And it has it in the form of Gilead Helam. In other words, something in the kav that has something very similar. Like he says, etzem ha-chochma is be'etzem the chochma of sefirot hagnuzos. So let's put it this way. When we give tzedakah, and you're using your midas ha-chesed in this world to help somebody, you're connecting not just with chesed of the kelim of Atzilus, you're connecting with chesed all the way in the vision of the artist, the essence sefirot hagnuzos. According to this opinion. According to the other opinion, you'd be connecting only with chesed through the kelim, and through them some eir. But you wouldn't be able to connect with the artist, or in this case the Eibishter, how he envisions chesed in his essence, which ultimately will lead us all the way to the essence. No, you could say mahu racham afata racham. You could say it's just we have to lidamas libeir. We're similar. We're trying to be similar to him, but not that we are really connecting with him. You're not like, and when you say this, you're connecting. I'm just giving some examples because it has to be brought down. This is really the essence of the whole picture here, what I just described. Now look, there's much more to say. I hope this was sufficient. Every class we try to add some stuff. The key thing is that there is the bottom line is there has to be a nafkamina from all of this. There's no such thing as just discussing this. That's why it's very easy to turn this into a scientific discussion, which, where's the kav and so on. It has to have implications. These are the implications. I have to think about it some more, and I'd love to be able to get somebody who maybe also applies themselves. Like, what would be the nafkamina in halacha, so to speak? Nafkamina, my banayu, in elam hazard. Like I just gave an example with tzedakah. But examples, that real tangible examples of something would be this way. If the air does have some spirits in it. There are definitely examples. I have to think some more. There is in Hilchos Chanukah, I wrote up a whole thing. There's a lot of dinim about what kelim you can use, what kelim you can't use. That I think that result from. There's also in Imre Bina. There's the dinim of, for example, what's the lashon there? Shemen shetzaf al gab hamayim. There's a shayla in Gemara whether the din of akira v'anoch is chal on that. If somebody lifts that, is it considered like? No. Akira anoch Shabbos. Shabbos, is it considered like, hypothetically, is it considered like lifting, or is it considered like one thing? In other words, there are examples in halachos. You can find examples where certain entities do they have a shape and form, or are they really part of something else? Anyway, the point I'm making here is this needs definitely some more thought, but there have to be real applications. This is the Rebbe Rashab leaves already for us. Applications of this difference. That philosophical application is very clear. One is that, I'll give you an example. According to the Rambam, that ultimate schar will be neshamas without gufim. I would say that leans toward a result of Eres Pshutim. That if you want to have Eir, you can't be in a guf. Ultimate schar is neshama. The shita, the Ramban, which what Chassidus paskins, that neshama, the Tchis HaMesim is the ultimate schar, means, how is that possible? It means because the Eres HaMitziyarim, and therefore they could come into containers, and together, Eir and Keli, forever can, that would be, I don't know if it's an exact example, because there you can say it's more about the Kalim. Do the Kalim have a root in the infinite? But the bottom line is, all this is coming to explain, the bottom line is that he's coming to explain how Tziyud and higher than Tziyud come together. And this is, of course, the hardest challenge. I'll give you another application. Here, there's all this talk about internet, right? How do we deal with Elam Hazeh? Modernity and faith. So generally speaking, you could say there's two approaches. One approach is you either lean toward faith and you compromise modernity. You have to give it up because it's a chodesh asim in atera, and it contradicts godliness. And we have to go back to the world of living in a shtetl, in Dal Damas of Torah and Halacha, and Elam Hazeh is an Nisayon. It's one big test that we have to ignore and just focus on Torah and mitzvahs. That's the approach. Another approach is the other extreme. No, now we have a modern world. The Eibishter wants us to adapt, dinah machus dinah, so to speak. We adapt. We compromise some of our Yiddishkeit, but that's part of it. You know, I don't want to give it any title or name. I don't want to insult any group. But they have such philosophy as well. Both of them suffer from the same problem. The two cannot coexist completely. They can't coexist. One has to compromise the other. Which really, before Matan Torah, that's the case. And that's it. You can't really join the two. You want to be connected to Elokus, to divine, you have to be a shepherd, like Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. You can't involve yourself in Elam Hazeh. Meraglim wanted a world like that. We want to live in Kel, in Gan Eden. Noach, in the beginning, he didn't want to go into the table, but once he did, he never wanted to leave. Because it's peace. Why should you go back to a world where Shachas and Chomas, etc., and all the... But the Eibishter told him, Tzeimen Ateva. I mean, you have constantly these things. So which one is it? Chassidus comes and reconciles and says, there's Eiris and Kelim. The Eir wants to be Me'in HaMoed in the Beis Medrash. The Keli wants to be in the Keli. But, my friends, they have to come together. And that's what the Eibishter wants. He wants a Dira B'Tachtenim. He didn't create Elam Hazeh just as a Nisayon. He wants Elam Hazeh, a Birur HaElam Hazeh. L'Sheves Yitzada. Dira B'Tachtenim. But there is, you could see a Havami, you see Talmidei Chacham, you see shittas that were Prushim more. And even if there's a Yetzim in a cloud, it says Ashbi, Alahabi also Kerashbi, Alay also Biyad. That's not the derech. I mean, I'm just bringing it out. Chassidus came to resolve this dilemma. Today, it's much more an issue than it was 500 years ago. This was a philosophy, a theory. It wasn't possible to engage the world. Then the question was, how much of the world can you engage already? What are you engaging already? You're talking about eating and sleeping and dealing with the business. Today you have a world there's no walls anymore. Everything is everything. So, this Akdus Hashem...
But do we have liars to show that this kind of...
No. There could be Yechidus Gula that it is like that. And we all have, everyone has an element of Nisayon in Elam Hazeh. Elam Hazeh but the question is if it's only a Nisayon. They have many rayas. First of all, I mean, besides Shittus Chassidus of Ozav Tazevimei and stuff like that, you can bring it for sure. Rashbi, when he came out, he was burning the Welt, and the Eibishter says, go back and you have to misaken. You have a lot of examples. You have basically Nadav and Avihu who wanted to have that, and they didn't. It's Ratzin Yeshuv, it's the Kalim. There's a lot of. Obviously, you have situations where there are times. Yom Kippur, we do separate from the world, and we go, but it's one day a year. Shabbos is one day a week. The question is, Sheshes Yom Tasim Malachtach is also a mitzvah. I mean, of course, a very strong case can be made. More importantly, listen, at the end of the day, we have Rabbeim who tell us, and it's not just plain seichel. They tell us what it is. You know, if the Rebbe had said, which that at Tafshin Yud, that the derech now is everybody should lock themselves up in yeshivas and in chilim to learn all day, and made a case for it, that would be the Birur Elam. Like Yibiru said, now you got to do is just learn. So be it. Obviously, it makes a lot more sense the way it happened because you see the world the way it is, and preparing it for Mol Ha'aretz Deis Hashem. It's hard to imagine, but derech hateva how that's going to happen if everyone was in Kol. Derech hateva. Obviously, you could have existent ledent, and as Hamshachas Ha'er, Elam Hazeh, and the Welt becomes Nizbarer. But I would say that's the opposite. The earlier generations, that was the way it was. Today, the fact that the Eibishter Tzedakah Asa Hakadosh Baruch Hu Shepizin L'bein Ha'umas, that we're everywhere, and we live, there's no longer a Beis HaMikdash right now. That alone tells you why are you there. The Hashgacha Pratis comes into play. There's a whole case. I mean, you can make a very strong case. Can someone make another case? Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear. Again, Chiddush Gula, look, there are people among in Chassidus Chabad Gufra, some people are Rosh Yeshivas and Rabbanim. We have Yisachar and Zvulun too. The question, however, is then the whole picture of things. Yeah, for sure.
So you didn't spell it out till the end. So what's the shit? What's the?
I didn't spell it out.
Chabad
presented that what I just said at length, that there is Kelim and Eris.
Yeah.
The Eir Kelim, the Eir has in it also some tzir, which means that also from the level of godliness, the structure of existence matters, basically, and can be elevated and refined. So when you see that the Eibishter create, like we say in the Gemara, that the mitzvot nitna Torah, chas v'shalom, is a lemdim tznius mechatul, or lemdim this and this, that means God created the world with properties that reflect on Him, and reflect on what He wants. It's not just, there's a Torah, and the Welt is one big, the Welt, in other words, Hashgacha Pratis, the tziyurim of the Welt, not just the clothes, the good thing. Like when you say bracha, you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, and then Shahakol ni b'dvarei, or Metzilach min aretz. The bracha has, the first part of the bracha is no tziyur, the second part of the bracha beferish at tziyur. So you see Eretz have mitzvot. I'm just giving you an example. That the Elokus, godliness, has to be brought in not just into your life, but into the details. And it's negate to the halacha, the details. Now, in other words, it's not just like the liquid that has no color. No, even the Elokus needs to have this. It's assembly like Mokum Orden Einem in Amida, in a certain concept. Why couldn't you just say there's no Mokum? Orden Einem in Amida and Gendikt. There's one place in the world, there's no place. No, you have to measure it, and the pasuk says beferish, the Orden is like this, like Kav Amida, exactly that. And it's Negeya. And the Orden didn't have those midas, it couldn't be a keli to Einem in Amida. That's even more paradoxical. The Eibishter could have said, there's one place, there's no gvul, there's no mokum, there's no mudman, because He wants it in mokum, He doesn't want l'maylam mokum. I mean, I'm just giving you examples of it. That the kan halacha, it's negeya, the midas, the detail. Exactly when Shabbos comes in. Exactly this shir, Kazayas, Pesach. I mean, so much is regulated. And this question is asked. All spiritual people say, God really cares this midah. You're dealing with the spirituality, the big God, beyond measurement, beyond mokum and zman. He really cares whether you put the mezuzah 2/3 up or or halfway up. Who cares? Why is mokum tefus mokum by? The answer is because the Eibishter says, Shem sheyesh lekeich built by gol kach yesh. Just like he's not more bligvul than he is gvul. And He wants the gvul dafke. He wants Torah's dafke tayag mitzvahs and not 614, not 612, and every mitzvah b'diuk mamash. How do you reconcile that with connecting to a God that is beyond measurement? That's where everyone has the dilemma. So some people, as I said, choose God and they ignore the details. Some choose the details and they ignore God. We even have in Frumkeit also. You have Fachnokta people, all they care about is the details. You ask them, where's the God? They forgot about God. They just became so obsessed with the details, they forgot that there's a God here. But on the other hand, you need both. And that's always been the big challenge. Because it's like, how do you have... Because here, not only do you have both. One is totally in the other. You can't have a mitzvah if you don't do it with the details. So you can't have Gili, Rotz, and Elyon if you don't have the exact measurement of of the matzah you just ate. Or whatever the shir is. I mean, it's a fascinating combination. For example, in Buddhism and in Far Eastern disciplines, the focus is on the light. The details, there's no such thing as diyuk mitzvahs. As a matter of fact, anyone that's really spiritual runs Shulchan Aruch for the first time, they're shocked. That's why many people who went to yeshiva don't believe that Jews believe in God, believe in a soul and believe in spirituality. Because when you learn halacha, it doesn't look like there's any spirituality here. On the contrary, this is what lawyers do. They sit and nitpick and they split hairs. A spiritual person is involved in so-called the light. I'm just trying to give examples. And Chassidus ultimately reconciles the two, makes it much more complicated. Because now you have to find an interface. How do you interface such two opposites? Finite and infinite. Gvul and bligvul. Transcendence and identity. So this is what the Rebbe Rashab is going through page after page after page. It's far from finished. It's just that here, this chapter what we have is he's concluding this section, which I think just covers really, this section of interface is Kav and it's just where these two meet. Look, we're not finishing the learning today. We're going to be learning more. Let's learn something inside. Let's finish the Maimer at least. I mean, now, trust me, I'd love to talk about it this way because it's that's how you really get the Havana of it. But the truth is, I'm trying to ground it also. We have to ground it in this discussion here. Is there more to say? I didn't bring up some fundamental questions because I don't want to confuse matters more than necessary. There's a lot more to say here. Because what the question now is, how do Kalim fit into this whole picture? Where are Kalim rooted? The Kalim are also Elokus. Kalim of Atzilus, Iyu v'gamu hichad. It's also divine. So how do they fit into the picture? So the answer is ultimately that Kalim, he keeps saying, is Kalim. Kalim have no transcendence. They're rooted in the kavanah. God wants a structure, but they don't have any transcendence. Eir has the power of transcendence and somewhat seer. I think I mentioned it yesterday. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to really have three things going on. You need containers, you need real identity, individuality. You need total transcendence, which is bligvul, era bligvul. He says that I should mention that the shimo, which also remains in the kav. The kav also has a impression from the era bligvul, right? From the era kolana, which affects it, which ultimately creates ultimate bittul. And then you need the in between, the air that is bittul, but it has siyur in it. That's really the three things throughout. That ends up being the three ksarim, really. That's the three ksarim. The three pirushim and keser that he's going to explain. And that's what we ultimately need. You need three. It's sevev, memaleh, sovev, and atzmos, basically. If you want to put it that way.
Combine the world and the spiritual.
Yeah, 1 second. Did he say in the last chapter the effect of the bligvul in the reshima that remains in it? Yeah, chochma. The chochma is bittul. Yeah. There's an expression which we shall, I'm sure, discuss in 8 Kunut Seitzachim. The Rebbe Rashab says that if you don't have yichudi law, you can't have yichudi tata. Which, people wonder, what does that mean exactly? Why can't you? I could just be bittul hayash, and there's no bittul mitzias. Because ultimately, if existence matters even a drop, ultimately bittul hayash can't happen either. Because then there's fart you. So bittul mitzias means it really all doesn't exist. But then he wanted it to exist. So then you can have a real bittul even on a lower level. I mean, that's one way to explain it. So in other words, the Tzimtzum b'derech siluk, one of the big chidushim of it is that it teaches us that it all doesn't have to exist, which means ultimate bittul. So then when the kav comes in, you could experience real bittul on your terms. If there was no Tzimtzum b'derech siluk, if it had left the kav at the end of the day, at the end, it's so subtle, you could say, you know what, I'm also a partner in this. Sam sapozhnik. I'm also an individual. Yeah, but it's like, it would be like somebody goes into the Rebbe, and he has complete bottle of mitzias, and he can't even find himself. Then he leaves, and then he is able to be a keli to hear something. If he didn't have that initial total bittul, then he's a shtickle, not a shutev, but I'm also a manda amar, so to speak. You need to know that you're nothing before you become something. Let's put it this way. That's the bottom line. Like a guy told me, I remember yeshiva, he was traveling around the yeshivas. He was like a Muslim. He was like getting everything. He was learning. He went to this yeshiva, that yeshiva, Niglech, Sidis. Then he went to Paris, the Brunway. He wanted to learn Avedis Atfilah from Rabbi. So he comes back and I ask him, how to go? He says, it was interesting. He says, but I said, did you learn how to daven? He says, yeah, but it was not as gishmak as I wanted it to be. So I said to him, maybe the whole point is that it shouldn't be gishmak. Tefillah. So he said to me, Afil nish gishmak, dafir zayin a bissel gishmak. So I said, that reminds me of the guy that went, this business executive, big guy, he rented, over the weekend he went to one of these like tough men. They have these male bonding things they call them Iron John. Men, they go together, they climb mountains, they grunt, they wear skins. Like, they want to bring back the male, that they stop being beat up by the women in their lives. They want to bring out the man in them, the caveman. The cave, right. Anyway. Yeah, to bring back the masculinity. And he comes back after the weekend. He paid $5,000 for it. And he owns a big company. So one of the guys that by lunch, one of the assistants, he says, I really sweated this weekend. It was really good. So he says, boss, if you want to sweat, why don't you just come work with us in the factory? So he says, I don't have time for that. I'm busy here, I'm the executive level. So he says, listen, if you sweat when you want to sweat, it's not sweating at all. That's what he said. I'm a schwitz when I will schwitz and there's nicht geschwitz. It's when you don't want. Samach Vov, there's a line in the beginning of HaCheder Shazah that when I was learning it then, I remember I found the source for it, which is like this. You saw the whole Samach Vov. One line from the Alter Rebbe is the Gan Samach Vov. It's a line in Vayakel Tov Kuf Samach Vov. Actually 100 years before. And the Alter Rebbe writes that Lo Meyord Neshama Lamata Kedei Lases Mashalei Rotze Lases, that it should do what it doesn't want to do. That the whole purpose of existence is to do not what you want. The Alter Rebbe says it, and the Rebbe Rashab in HaChedesh begins. That's the Yisod of Iveda B'Keach Atzmei. That has to come from you. That's the work to break that which you don't want to do. I could show it to you. It's a line. It says that to do not what you want. Obviously, it's a little more than that. It's also, we need the Nefesh HaBamis to participate. So, obviously, but it's an interesting expression. Okay, let's learn the end of this Maimer. It's page Memvov 46. Valpi Hanal, this was added later. This is the end of the Maimer. But as we've learned, this already adds often dimensions to what it said. So, Alpi Hanal, we just learned this whole summary with the Kav. Alpi Hanal, according to the above, Yuvan will understand what it says that God spoke. This is the law of the Torah, Asher Tziva Hashem, what God commanded. He asked the questions: what is Asher Tziva? What's the poroh? Ma'aseh b'chutz. Now, because now it says that Hashem put Adam. He placed him in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, la'avdal, to serve him, and serve her, and l'shamra, to protect her. Pashas refers to Gan Eden, la'avdal, l'shamra, right? So why do you say, is it Lashon Nekeva, Gan Eden, avdal, shamra? It's a Lashon Nekeva? V'amar Azal, first of all, Pashas, what does it mean, la'avdal? What shamra you can say, to protect the garden but there's no one even around. What's love the l'shamra? So Chazal say, Amar Azal, love the zuramach mitzvah. That's the positive, 248 positive mitzvahs. L'shamra shasam mitzvahs leisasa. And l'shamra, to protect, is the 365 negative mitzvahs. Thou shalt not. Uba medrash Rabbi Isa, and medrash Rabbi says shekoyal veidus hakarbonos. That the love the l'shamra goes on the service of the offerings. V'hainu, which means through karbonis. We know Adam brought a carbon. What does a carbon do? A carbon is mamshich. It draws down teshuvah, additional energies into Gan Eden. This is a very synergistic thing. And Samach Vav, by the way, the first Maimer, he also concludes with the same pasuk and the same idea. The hine, what means teshuvah? What does this mean? It's really the purpose of existence is spelled out right here in this pasuk. It says Gan Eden. It says Vayita, that God planted. It doesn't say Havaya. It says Havaya Elokim. That God planted.
Both names.
Right. It's both names. Gan Eden Me'er Gili Shem Havaya. Then Gan Eden was radiated. Remember, before this, I don't know if this is the first time Havaya. No, the first time Havaya is mentioned, remember, it's 26 times Elokim is mentioned in the creation, and Havaya is mentioned only at the end. I think this is one of the first ones that it's mentioned. I don't know if it's the first. I think the first is B'yem Aseis Hashem Elokim Shema V'Sa'aretz. Or maybe this may be the first.
That's later.
This is earlier. Anyway, but bottom line is that Havaya is introduced, so it's not an accident. That Gan Eden radiated the Gilui of Shem Havaya. Shezeu Yisra Gan Eden ala Elamis. Shem Hashem Elokim. That's the advantage, the virtue, the superiority of Gan Eden over all the worlds. Which worlds is he talking about? I assume he's talking about the higher worlds. Or is he talking about the world outside of Gan Eden? Okay. Why? Because Shehem is Shem Elokim, B'chinas Helam. The worlds from the word Elam, Meloshin Helam. They come from Shem Elokim, which is concealment. Gan Eden Meir Shem Havaya B'chinas Gili. And Gan Eden was a radiating light, it radiated, illuminated light of Shem Havaya B'chinas Gili. In other words, he's teaching Elokim is Helam and Havaya is Gili. V'hu inyan biyud nivra elam haba, as opposed to behei nivra elam haza. What the Gemara says, that biyud nivra elam yud kei, the two names of Hashem, that biyud nivra elam haba, that with the letter yud created elam haba. The other half of it is behei nivra elam haza. What is yud? B'chinas chochma. So nivra elam haba, that's a level of chochma. V'zer gili hatainuk shebegan eden. And that now he's adding the word tainuk. A gan is connected to tainuk, garden. So this is Gili HaTainuk. When we say Gan Eden, Gan Eden. Eden is Meloshin Tainuk. So this is the Gili, the revelation of pleasure in Gan Eden. I mean, it's just building the case. We'll soon see where this is going. Umashakos Vayita Hashem Elokim, Shenikra B'Shem Netiyah. And what the meaning, what is Vayita? If it's about the Gili, what's Vayita that he planted? Shenikra B'Shem Netiyah. It's called the name of planting. In other words, planting means a step away. It's planting it like somewhere else. Like if it was chochma, chochma has a gilui tainig, and he's planting. It's like vayita, right? He's like vayita Hashem. He's planting Hashem into Gan Eden. He's planting it, bringing it. It's like implanting it. Oh, I said the other way. Because the netiyah is just the planting. It's not yet a fruit that will grow out of it. So in Gan Eden, he planted the seed that would become later a tree of fruit. Okay. This is Gan Eden on its own. This is not love de l'shamra. This is not taste Mercedes. This is Gan Eden on its own. Now, however, through the Aveda of Torah and mitzvahs, Avedas HaKarbonos and the service of offerings, but bitter, I specifically translate Karbonos offerings and not sacrifices, because Karbonim Loshen Kiruv, and sacrifice is like almost the opposite meaning. Okay, offering. But bitter and Nefesh Abamis, the Adam, Kiyakri Mekem, the bitter that the of refining the animal soul, like it says, the Adam Kiyakri Mekem. Elsewhere he teaches, why does it say Adam Mekem Ki Yakriv? Because Adam Ki Yakriv Mekem, from your Nefesh Abamis, you are offering yourself. Mamshichim, through this Aveda, Mamshichim, Teshuvah says, Began Eden. So this, we draw down, we transmit, we draw additional edus, additional energies into Gan Eden, higher, Mibchinas chochma, from the level of chochma, in other words, in the Vayita, which only has a seed. We draw down more energy from chochma, and you really see where he's going, the Eira El Kolana and everything. It's all touching it in the pasuk, and also from the energy that's higher than chochma. keser, which means the level of keser, crown. The Ramach mitzvah sasal litzisa, v'zayim mitzvahs the Rabbanon hein tarach amudei eir. What's the connection? Because the 613 mitzvahs with the 7 mitzvahs of Rabbanon is 620. So 248 mitzvahs, which is la'avda, which is l'shamra, 365 plus the zayin mitzvahs the Rabbanon. It says Adam Rishon, even Lefnei Matan Torah, I guess they also did the mitzvahs the Rabbanon, what does it say about? It says about Avram Avinu that he did even the mitzvah of Erev Tavshil. Okay, that's just interesting. That's 200. The Tarach Amudei is keser. Tarach is keser. So what do we have here? Let's just get this figured out. Okay, we have the Gan Eden is the level of. We have Elamis is Elokim, Helam. Gan Eden is Gili Havaya. Only a spark, only a speck of chochma. Okay, that's why it's Vayita. Then through Avei Torah mitzvahs and Avei Karbonis, we're mamshich, which is keser. Not only keser, the chochma, more eres from chochma, and all the way from keser to rachamudei. That's what we got here. 3 levels. Okay, fine. At least we have our coordinates here. We don't have to guess. You can say that this level of keser, which you just said in the previous time, is the Elokolona. It's the impression from the bligvul energy that remained in the essence sefirot agnuzas and in the kav, which is a gilia helam from the essence sefirot agnuzas, from the hidden things. If you remember, he brought from Tanya, Perek Lamed Hey, that yesh leimer, that because there was some impression left over, that's why chochma has bittul. So basically, that's the nekuda here. That through the Torah mitzvahs that we do and the mitzvah kabbanis, we're mamshech in Gan Eden in the world, those higher eres, all the way from keser. That's the eir reishim abligvul. 1 second. Oh, is this so complicated? God Almighty. And just reviewing again in my mind. So the kav is gilia helam from the essence of the yesh ma'ayin from the bligvul. But it has a reishim of the bligvul. Has a reishim, even though it's yesh ma'ayin, it has a reishim. I love it. It covers every base here. Nothing is left, but it's only a reishim. Because the shit of the kav is bligvul, it's not just a reishim, it's mamish bligvul, and you have to completely conceal it. It'd be interesting to really study the difference, what would be in existence, the two shittas. The kav is bligvul, but complete siluk. The kav is eragvul, but it's only helam, but it has a reishim from the bligvul. So, yeah. And according to the shitta that the kav is bligvul, does it have a reishim from the bligvul, or is it the total concealment? Instead, in other words, it's interesting. What kind of kav is this kav? That's quite the other opinion. And then more importantly, the nafkamina. If you could apply this into a model of how to deal with people, how to solve problems, it would be unbelievable. I'm sure he does. Remember later, what we learned Eris and Kalim, Eir and Yesh, how the Eir and Kalim doesn't work together. I'm sure that's where all this plays itself out in a serious way. Because that's the whole thing. When the Eir is too strong and the Kalim is too weak, that's what's going on. So, and that's even according to the Shitta that the Eiris are alright. There's also, don't worry, the plot thickens, it's nishta ze pashut. Even everything seems reconciled by Chabad, which is, I know. Yeah, good. Listen, they say there's only 2 types of people in this world. Those that know they don't know, and those that don't know they don't know.
So at least I know my blood.
And remember,
O plus, versus the O plus or the O plus?
You can go open up Likutei Torah Parshat Chanun, and he teaches how Yidiyah and Amun is all relative. It's the first relativity theory. What you know today, what yesterday you didn't know was Amunah, today you know, and then tomorrow a new level of Amunah arises, and then another. So it's a journey. As long as you're climbing, you're all right. Don't worry about it. If you're not climbing, then you can start worrying.
I just want to understand also in terms of Parshat academic knowledge, like Rebbe Rashab chooses
No. That's why I was reading this actually. A lot of this is based on, everything is based on the previous. Not here, but in many places, there's a shak v'tari, which shitta did Alter Rebbe go with? Remember, the shittas were known before Chabad. There's shittas in Talmidei Arizal. There's Arizal, there's the Pardes, there's Mareches, there's the Tzemach Tzedek has a famous drush called the Drush Gimel Shittas. It's printed here. It's called Drush Gimel Shittas, or sometimes he calls it the Drush Rab Menachem Rekanti. So there's 3 shittas generally about the sefirot. If you want to have a good collection of it, Rabbi has in Sefer Erchim, there's an erech called Eres Mitzuyarim. Eres, Siyurim, Pshitusam. There he brings them all. It's very complicated. It's not just 3 shittas. In the 3 itself, there's different opinions what each shitta is saying. And then there's chassidus. And the Rebbe spoke about it, Shabbos Parsha B'Shalach, Tovshin Tezvav, and he was metavech all the shittas. He says, in Pnimius Akav, it's Pshutim. Chitzenius Akav, it's Mitziyorim. You have to go through it. It's a sugya, big sugya shlema. This is even before Chassidus Chabad. The Alter Rebbe, in different Maimorim, spoke in different ways. So in the Drush Gimel Shittas, he begins to gather and say, this in Tovkov Samach Tes is mashma like this from the Alter Rebbe. And Tovkov Samach Vav is mashma like that. And they reconcile. Generally speaking, Samach Vav leans more toward Eiris Mipshutim and Ayin Beis is Eiris Mitzuyarim. He says many times, L'fi Hashita Mevur B'Drush Zeh. So it shouldn't disturb, but they're both legitimate shittas completely. They each have something the other doesn't have. At the end of the day, they both are correct. You have to say the Primis Ha'er is more Pshitus and Chetzenius Ha'er is more Mitzuyah. Yeah, but that's not a way to just resolve that. You only say Elu ve'elu after you Horava. You can't start with Elu ve'elu. No. Some people say Elu ve'elu. Okay, I don't have to even go there. They're all right. Good. I'm happy.
I feel from what you're saying, it's so interesting that both of them actually also apply in real world.
Absolutely. They both apply because remember, it's like Shammai and Hillel. Sometimes they're both right. They both have an element. Remember, at the end of the day, it's about transcendence. It's about taking a world and making it a dira b'tachtenim. The question, are you focusing on the dira leis baruch or are you focusing on tachtenim? The answer is, on Shabbos, you focus a little more on dira leis baruch. On weekdays, you focus a little more on tachtenim. And if you go too much in one way, you need balance in the other. Someone says, what's more important? Davening, learning, or going to work every day? You can't answer that question. The Seder is Beis HaMedrash leBeis HaKnesses, Beis HaKnesses leBeis HaMedrash, and then the Kavanah, if you took a Kavanah El Yeina, is Tachtenim. But if you don't have the keches on Beis HaMedrash and Beis HaKnesses, you won't be able to do the Tachtenim right. So the question is, Torah higher or mitzvahs higher? At the end of the day, they both have a mile over the other. Talmud and Maisa. I mean, this is a constant. It shouldn't disturb us that there's. I mean, look, as children, we like to believe one thing. Tell me which one's the better one. But it's not that way. It's just not that way. And coming to peace with that is actually the sign of maturity. It's a sign of reality that life is not like that. The Rebbe, I remember so many times with koach would say, "Melenten that my morim shvuos, a shvuos is the hechste zach. Hecher for Pesach and Chukas now. Then you come to my Chukas, and we hear the Chukas is the hechste zach." And you see, the Rebbe asked this question. He said, and the answer is very simple. He says, "Now this is the shar through which Pesach goes and Chukas and everything. The mitzvah da Havaya beit fei. So it's not a pel. Yom Kippur, that's the shar. Chukas tanzman. Yom Kippur, you don't dance. I mean, I'm just, so understanding. Look, if God didn't create diversity, so we want one thing, but He created a diverse world, and He created. That's the tziyut is critical, as I said before. Anyway, let's continue. So now he's teaching. Yesh leimer that we add through Torah mitzvahs and a carbonus. Mechinas keser, that's the level of Ein Sof, that shada that rests in chochma, which is the reishim, the impression left from the bligvul. This means liyes beganeden shub zeh bechinas memaleh. The Gan Eden, which is the level of memaleh kalam, gilui b'chinas Ein Sof v'seiv hasheda b'chochma, should be the gilui, revelation of the infinite surrounding transcendent light energy that rests in chochma. If you remember, he said in the previous page, he brought from the Kutei Torah Kerach that a chochma is mislabish eira sovev in the form of pnimi. So bottom line is, you want to have sovev into memaleh. Now remember, these are hints to the whole hemshech, because the hemshech is talking about pnimi right now. He's not talking about keser. Keser was the beginning, and he's going to come back to it. But he's hinting already to what's going on here. So throughout the hemshech, he keeps talking about that the pnimi, we're talking about pnimi, you want a structure, dafka. And he said, Eiris are pnimim, they're not makifim. But in them, they have a reshim of the Eira al kolana. Ach, hine poroh adumah, maiseh b'chutz dafka. Now he goes to poroh adumah. So he established the union of Gan Eden, Karbonis. That's general Karbonis. Now we're talking about poroh adumah as a different type of mice. So kol the mice in Karbonis is bifnim, as we said in Eil Moed, by the Mizbeach HaChitzon. However, now poroh adumah myself b'chutz dafka. The Red Heifer in Parshat Chukas its Maiseh, all the service done with it was done outside of the Mishkan. There's a Mikdash. The plot thickens. Gan Eden is Gan Eden. Now there's a river that leaves Gan Eden. We're going out of Gan Eden. Umisham Yeparad. Right. Yeah. But here, for practical purposes, he means here from. Well, Begashmis, what Nor Yotzim Eden, physically, it was out of the Gan. It was. The Gan Eden was at the end of Four Rivers. Right. So Nor Yotzim Eden is the source. Eden is Bechal Keser Tainuk. Eden goes into chochma, and Shom Yeporad. Nor Yotzim Eden. It broke into four, and that's the Hashkes Sagan, right? All four. That's where they say Gan Eden is where four rivers come together. But the rivers are outside of Gan Eden.
The Frierdiker Rebbe writes in Amman is a physical place in this world.
Yeah. Not only the Frierdiker, the Mittler Rebbe has a whole thing. I once wrote a long. It's Geshem Sheberuach. He says Ruach Shebe Geshem. If you want, I'll send you. I did a research on this extensively. Yeah.
Geographically,
the Mittler Rebbe asks.
It's the north of Iraq, geographically.
No. Geographically, it's probably south of Iraq, the bottom tip.
That's where the Hidekel does come.
The problem is there's no four rivers, and the four rivers, different opinions. So there's a big bahola. There's a Ramban also that they saw Gan Eden from a distance. There's a whole Ramban. The Frierdiker Rebbe is a hetic from the Mittler Rebbe, and I'll show you. I wrote a whole thing with all the sources. Frierdiker Rebbe is just writing over what it says. Basically, they say that once the Chet Tzadas, Gan Eden was there. Gan Eden was it says Zuach Shebegeshem, was Ruchni Shebegashmis, and when Gashmis became more grob, you don't see Gan Eden anymore.
No,
it was a Ruchni. And that's what they answered. That's what he answers. What is the answer there? That's what he answers. It was physical, but that physical, that was more edler physical than we have today.
Which is not visible.
Yeah. So I have a theory that it's based on a lot of things that it actually was covered over by the water, the Persian Gulf, that's below there. It's not my own theory. I saw it places, but it stems with what it says in Chassidus. In other words, it was physically there.
They have marshes there,
Like
hundreds of kilometers of marshes around Basra.
Look there. There's also where's the lot the Cherev Mislahatas. Where's that? It says that there's a So it's clearly not the Gashmis today, but it says that they shouldn't be able to go back in.
Right.
So what does that mean?
Something is making you blind, probably.
Okay, I'll go on. Nor Yotzim Eden, and a river went out of Eden. Misham Yeporad. I'll show you if you want to send me an email. I'll send you all the sources for it. Misham Yeporad, and from there it separated for Hoya L'Dalad Reshim, and it transformed into four Rashim, four heads. Vein Dalat, meaning four rivers. Vein Dalat Chayes HaMerkava. These are the four creatures of the chariot. Pnei Adam, Pnei Nesher, Pnei Aryeh, Pnei Sher. Ubishtalsus Nasim is a Dalat Malchis, and as it evolved, it became the four empires. B'derech klal, the four empires we know are Bovel, different times, Paras Amadai, Edom, and Yovam, And there's different opinions what they are, but the four Malchus are the four main empires. Rome is Edom. Shezeu hatainuk shenafel b'derech shvira v'nefila. What is this Ruchnius? So Gan Eden, we said, was a gili of Havaya, the revelation of Havaya, and through Aveda, you bring all the way from keser, the Erein Sof, Hablikvul, that is impressed in the Kav. What is this? Now we're talking about that which is not Kedusha. That the Nor Yotzim Eden, going out of Eden, out of Keser, chochma, and there it turned into four. These four, as it comes down on earth, this is the Tainug, the level of pleasure, Eden, that is no longer Kedusha. That fell down through the Shvira and Nefila, through the breaking, the shattering of the containers, and it fell. So even though the Daled Malchus are rooted in the Daled Merkava, and the Merkava is rooted in the Daled of the Nahar, and all rooted in Eden, but through all this Ishtalshlus, it's like, think of it like, there's Eden is a high level of keser, tainug, that branches off into four. These four, through Ishtalshlus and Shvira and so on, end up being the four empires that brought tzaras to the world. And this is the inyan of the poroh adumah, of the red heifer that we do outside, whose services are, who the preparing it is done outside. Chutz means outside. Hainu inyan hatshuvah lapich yetzahara shenofel b'shvira. In Havaya, it's the level of teshuvah to transform the yetzahara that fell through the shattering of the containers. He's referring to Toyu, but the bottom line is, in other words, the Havaya of Torah mitzvahs and Havayas karbonis, that's in Kedusha, that's to bring higher energy into it. Poroh adumah, that's regular karbonis. Poroh adumah is chutz, the Havaya is in chutz, outside of Kedusha. And what is that? Is to take the Yetzirah that fell through the Shvira, Reconciling, the koach bal teshuvah. I will find you outside. What means outside? Outside of Kedusha. That's referring to Baal Teshuvah. I will find you there, and meaning God will find, right? And Tzachel goes on and find you and help you return. V'sheva hazos, and the 7 sprayings. By the poroh adumah, when they would mix, they after they offer the poroh, they take the ash, right? And put on it the mayim and mix it with mayim chayim, and then it would be sprayed 7 times by the kohen on the person who was impure. So what are the Shevan Azos? He's now explained mechich pnei elamed, and it was sprayed facing toward pnei elamed, which is the door, the opening of the, what do we call it, the covenant, the Ark of Covenant, whatever. Tabernacle. Yeah. What is that? Hulal is pnimiusa. That by doing that, you're taking the person who's bechutz, outside, doing teshuvah, you're elevating him, pnimiusa, hulal is pnimiusa, you're elevating him toward the pnim, which is pnei elamed. You're elevating him, in other words, you're not just working with him out there, you want to elevate him back to Kedusha, to the inside of the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan. V'achar kach sreifas haporoh. The hazos come before the sreifa. How could that be? 1 second. Oh no, the hazos of the dam. They spray the blood and then they... Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was the spraying of the eish together with the mayim, which is after the sreifas haporoh. What's the order there?
Here we're making the poroh adumah.
Huh?
Here we're making poroh adumah.
No, but it says v'achar kach sreifas haporoh.
It's after the shrita and then they do the hazoyis.
What?
This is after the shrita, the poroh adumah, then they do the hazoyis and then they burn.
What do the hazos consist of?
Yeah,
right. What do they do? What are the hazos? They spray what?
The blood, down the parah. Yeah?
I have to look inside the chumash. Okay. Then comes the burning of the cow. By burning it, you turn it into ash. Like an example of a burned piece of wood that turns into ash. The Eifer that remains, the ash that remains, is the essence and the personality v'tzir ha'etz of the original wood. No, my mistake. Yeah. Hold on, my mistake. Yeah. The Eifer is the essence of, I was wondering what the tzir is, the essence of the thing, of the poroh, or of the wood. The tzir eitz, and the shape of the eitz, who markovas hagimel, you say this, ma'im ruch afar. In other words, the piece of wood has 4 elements, like everything has. You have water, ruach ma'im afar, which is wind, air, and water and earth. That combines it. When you burn it, what remains is only the etzem, not the tzir, not the shape and form. This is all the Likutei Torah and Chukas speaks about it. What is this in Aveda? This is physical. The safe of the poroh. What does it mean in our Aveda, the burning of the poroh? Same thing as Yetzer Hara, is Tzir Hara, has a shape of evil. What's the tziyur? It's the intelligence and the feelings of the Yetzer Hara that use its mind to conceive and feelings towards its own taivus, its own desires. That's a tziyur. Every Yetzer Hara has a tziyur.
It's to be passionate about his desires.
Passionate and committed to, yes, seichel amidus. So each of us, in other words, your Yetzer Hara has a tziyur, it has a particular shape and form. And now we need to do something with that. What do we do with it? Interesting, he uses shvira here again. Before shvira was on that it fell, how it comes down. And now he's talking about the shvira of the shvira, so to speak. Yeah. So all this tzir, this shape and form of the evil inclination needs to be burned and to be broken, legamri, completely. You don't want to annihilate it completely. You want to get rid of the tzir. You want to get rid of its manifestation, and what the only thing should remain is the ash. Only the power of desire that is shapeless. As it is without any shape and form. That can be, and that for this can be transformed to holiness, sanctity, with an intense desire for the divine. Let me just explain this. This is basically the Likutei Torah Parshat Chukas. It's actually, I use it all the time. It's a very powerful concept. I was speaking once to a group of teens at risk who were in rehab, drugs and alcohol. They were already getting out of it. They had all been burned. And I asked them all this question. I said, how did you get into this trouble in the first place? No human being on earth wants to be addicted to something. Wants to be dependent on pot or on other drugs or on alcohol. Nobody wants to be. But why should I be dependent on something else? How'd you get into this trap? So it was interesting. Someone said bad friends. Someone said, I didn't think it was going to go that far. Blah blah blah. And then we talked about it. They were intelligent kids because they were all going through rehab. They were really working on themselves, and they were mostly 19, 20. And then I asked them, so what do you think? What would you tell someone else who was in that situation? How would you prevent? Some said you can't really prevent. Everybody's got to go through their thing. But a few of them said some interesting things. I said, so what do you think of the root of everything? What's the root of it all? And what I pointed out to them was part of a collective conversation was everything has a root. It doesn't begin that somebody wants to drink or somebody wants a drug. It begins with boredom. You're bored. You're empty. Or, even more, you're very passionate. You really want something. You want excitement. And you can't find it easily. So whatever gives you excitement, you go for it. If it's healthy, it's healthy. It's like a person in the desert. He's very thirsty. He's so desperate that whatever you give him, he's going to drink. It may be poisonous, but he drinks it. So I said, look, the Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah that when a person desires something, we all have our taivus. What's a desire? So you think a desire is not a good thing. You have a taiva for not appropriate thing. We all have taivas, different things. It's not healthy. It's just destroy the desire. He says something interesting. He says, no, you have to burn it. The desire itself, he says, the koach mesaveh is a holy thing. Who gave us the power to desire things? Dead people don't desire things. Neshamas desire something. So the power, the koach mesaveh, doesn't have yet shape. The problem is that the object of desire. And that's what you have to work on. No, it's a
desire motivates us.
Right, exactly. So for example, a little child is playing with toys, and he's having a lot of fun. A little older, 15 years old, is not interested in toys. He's interested in something else. Someone else is passionate reading a book, and then a tzaddik has passion doing a mitzvah, learning Torah. Is there a difference between the desire of the child and all of these? The difference is only in the object. Obviously, there's also a difference, ultimately. But the bottom line is what you want to teach somebody is, don't destroy your desire. Just take it, the same desire, let's say, for passion. Channel the passion to something else. And that way, you're not... See, if you tell somebody, don't do this, don't do that, don't feed your desire, it's almost impossible to hold back a desire and passion. But if you teach somebody to redirect it, to harness it, exactly.
Young adolescent.
Yeah. So bottom line, what he's saying here is this: that the taiva, the Yetzer Hara has a taiva, has a shape and form. What you do by burning it is you leave over something. You leave the essence of the desire, so it's there, and now it can be directed where it has to be directed. And this explains. Yeah, exactly. All this is interesting. I'm thinking how this applies to there, because remember, what we said till now really is in the Gan Eden. This is outside of Eden. So really, this is already not in Atzilus even. This is, you're talking here in Biyah. All this, yeah, even lower than Biyah. And this is why the mitzvah poroh was by Elazar. Dafka Elazar, not Aaron. Elazar did it. Why? The Isa b'Yalkut, Elazar keil ezer. In Yalkut it says, Elazar is the word keil ezer. The Eibishter helps him, or keil ezer, the Eibishter should help. Habolatayr Messiah, that a person who comes to be purified, they help him. Because you need an additional element. In order to go out of tumah, from an impure place to purity, you need help and assistance from above. And that's why it was Elazar. Zeo el Kelezer. So in other words, Elazar was the force that helped the person get out of the impurity of tumah's mess. And through this Aveda poroh adumah, through this transformation, you draw down the level of live water, mayim chaim. Mayim chaim means a live spring, a water that's connected. That's what it says. V'nosan mayim chaim. You can't just have mayim. It's not enough a mikveh. With here, you need to have by pumas mes. You need to have mayim chaim at the highest level of Torah. So mikveh, lower levels, you could have still water, rainwater, but some things need connection to the chaim, to the source, live connection. You know, in Halacha talks about what mayim chaim is exactly, etc. But what is it? Ruchnius, mayim ubchinas chochma, or mayim chaim ubchinas makra chochma. Mayim, water, is the level of wisdom, chochma. Or mayim chaim, live water. Ubchinas makra chochma, and ubchinas chochma k'mo shehi best sefirot agnuz. The chochma as it's in the hidden spheres. Koydem at Tzimtzum, before the Tzimtzum. Sha'chochma b'madrei gavoya v'elyena be'etzem. The chochma there is in a very lofty and extremely high, fundamentally high level. V'gam yesh bo er she'v'zichdus v'izkalos kulam. And it also has in it, again, the er el kolona. Lav dafka, no? Oh yeah, v'hainu er el kolona. It also has within it also the air of the unity of all of them interconnected. V'hainu er el kolona u'kanal perek chav zayin. Which means the air, the synergy that is above all of them, as we discussed earlier in chapter Perek Chav Zayin, chapter 27. Okay, 1 second here. So what we said was like this. Karbones are mamshich also from the reishim of the bli gvul. And now he's saying poroh adumah is mamshich from there. So what's the difference between the two? It has to be higher, this. Because this is hisabche. It has to come from, has to reach. Okay, let's see if you maybe answers it. I don't know. Gam yeshleim, huh? Oh, it does say. Gam yeshleim, you could also say, okay. That's also mamshich, it also draws down the atzmas bligvul, not just the reishim, in other words. That's higher than the root of the energies, in their first and highest source and root.
Isn't that the
It is, but before it's only the reishim. Before it's only, you can also only have the reishim of it, or you could have the actual bligvul. So the sapche does, yeah. Exactly. That's what it sounds like. That's Bapashtas what's going on. Wow. See, these short things, he adds a whole dimension to the whole avon of it. And that's what it says by poroh adumah, twice Havaya. Like we said, Asher tziva vaydaber Hashem, Asher tziva Hashem. He asked, what do you need both? The two names of Havaya, it's known, he said this earlier. Remember Perek, I think Perek Yutes, if I recall correctly. No, my mistake. No. Chapter 16. Talked about two Shem Havayas? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. In chapter 16. There's two themes of Havaya. The Echad who beseder Shtalshus. First Shem Havaya is in the cosmic order, in the structure. And the second one is higher than the structure. Aha, that's it. Vayita Havaya Elokim. You'll be mamshich the first Havaya. Let's see what he says here. Yeah. From higher from the structure, higher than from higher than the structure. We could say oh, 1 second. Okay, it's two yeshlemas. He keeps saying two levels here. Yeshlema, this is the level of the root of the Eres, the way they were before the Tzimtzum. Gam yeshlemer, again, the Gam yeshlemer consistent with the other one. I guess that's to resolve the dilemma that I was saying. One is that this level of the higher Havaya is the Shoshe Eres, which is the Sheresh of Era Gvul. And the second that is the Shoshe Sheresh of Sovev Klamen, of the Blig, in the Bligvul. Or commotion is Barleil Perek Tazayin. Oh, he does bring Perek Tazayin. Like we discussed earlier in chapter 16, the Beis Hashem is saying Shoshe Beis Madreg is the Memaleh Klamen Sovev Klamen. The two names are the root of the two levels of memaleh and sovev. So that would be consistent with the second interpretation. That Havaya Leila would then be sovev, not memaleh. Like it says elsewhere, and this is what it says. The first Havaya, that this is the Shem Havaya of Ishtalshus. The name of Havaya within the structure speaks to Moshe and says, This is the law of the Torah. The lower level of Havaya is telling Moshe that this is the law of the Torah that was commanded by the higher Havaya that's higher than the structure, that you draw down through the Red Heifer. The Maaseh B'chutz, whose whole work is done outside. The Dafke, specifically. That's the Ayin of teshuvah, returning to go out of impurity to purity. And for this you need to have assistance, that's why it's through Elazar Ke'elezer. God assists. Through this we draw down the live water, the source of chochma, which is the revelation of the essence of the light, the bligvul. So bottom line is, there is an interpretation on a basic level, it's only the Shoshe Eres, but additional Yeshleimer is, the additional explanation here is that it's the higher part. So there you have the picture. You have the world comes from Elokim, Helam. Gan Eden is Havaya, but only Vayita. It comes from chochma, but it's not pure chochma. Through the Ovdel Eshamra, through our work of Torah mitzvot and karbonis, we are mamshich, we bring down chochma, and all the way from keser, tarach, the 620 rays that come from the mitzvahs and karbonis. That means, from the, like he says, Yeshlema, that comes from the root of the kav, which is in the hidden spheres, and the reshim, which comes into chochma from keser. Okay, that's through regular Aved. The poroh adumah has an additional thing now, is working with outside of kedusha. It goes outside of the world of holiness, and here you need to have a transformation. And this transformation comes through Ke'elezer, which helps us, God, the assistance that we need. But here you also reach another level. Through this, you come to the level of the transformation. Well, first he says Yeshleimer. First he says you come to the level of the Shoshe Eres. No, Ere El Kolon is already no. Okay, first you come to Ere El Kolona, which I think is already more than the Reshim. It's already more than the Reshim, because the Reshim, the Aveda through regular Befnim, through Torah mitzvahs karbonis, brings you to the Reshim. It says Yeshlema, that's the Reshim, that's the impression from the Bligvul and the Gvul. It says that clearly. So zo hareisha Ein Sof abligvul. Here he says you get actually the Eir El Kolana, which is the whole energy that's there, not just the Reishim, like before the Tzimtzum. And then comes, remember, the Kav has a Tzimtzum, so the only thing it has left is the Reishim. So the regular Aveda leads you to the Reishim, to the impression. Poroh adumah leads you to the Eir El Kolana, which is the root of the Reishim. And the Yesh Leimer goes, that root leads you not only to Eir El Kolana, to Mamish, to Bli Gvul. So Eir El Kolana, is that the Bli Gvul? No, that's not the Bli Gvul. No. Eir El Kolana is how the Kav, how Esesphere Sagnuzis connects with the Bli Gvul, but it's not the Bli Gvul. And the highest interpretation is that the Bli Gvul Mamish. So we have everything covered here. Aveda, regular Aveda, meaning an Atzilus, would lead you to the Reishim, to the impression. Teshuvah leads you to the Eir El Kolana as if it's before the Tzimtzum. And, or even higher, to Bli Gvul Mamish, that's even higher than the Shar She'eris. The root of Sevel Kalam. It really comes down to the way you interpret Havaya de Leila, the higher Havaya. And that's what it means, the two Havayas. So the Havaya de Leila could be the Reishim. Havaya de Leila could also be the Eir El Kolana above the Reishim. Okay, keser, which we read already, I'll read it again. Tzimtzum hu nisal me'er Ein Sof v'nishar b'chinas ha'ashara. The concealment, the Tzimtzum is that there's a concealment of the infinite light and it remains only a hashara. Only the envisioning. Shehi mekanakuda legabe Eir Ein Sof. That's like a nakuda, a point compared to the whole infinite light. V'netzala chochma, and chochma emanates. Shehi nakuda harishena des galus. That's the first nakuda that is revealed. V'yesh bo beis tzimtzumim, and it has within it two concealments: silu ka'era ein sof, the complete removal of the infinite light, umiyatei, and diminishing of the finite light. V'nishu b'reishim eira ein sof, and remains, and from the infinite light remains an impression. V'yesh leimer shezeh b'chinas eira ein sof shebechachma. You could say reishim eira ein sof in the nakuda of chachma. I'm going to go back to that in a moment because I want to go back to something that I saw that I think. V'yesh leimer, you could say this is the level of eira ein sof, infinite light within chachma. V'zeu sha'kav b'chinas gilui ha'helam l'gabe shar she'eris, and this is the kav that's a revealing of what's concealed compared to the relative to the root of the energies. V'yesh ma'ayin, and it's a new reality compared l'gabe eira ein sof shenistalik, compared to the infinite light that was removed completely. V'nishar reishim ha'kav, and only an impression has remained in the kav. L'fizeh yitzda gam l'shita zu sha'kav keser mechaber mishum reishim ein sof shebei. And according to this, it's justified. We also tell, according to this opinion, that the kav, which is, even though it's rooted in the finite energy, it binds and unites because of the impression of the infinite light within it. With all the above, we explain is the pasuk zeis chukas hatera. I do want to go back to one thing, which is probably what is confusing you and what you're going. In the beginning of the Perek, there was one thing that is, even when we read it, was a little strange. Not strange, it needs explanation. Because if you look in the beginning of Perek, he says like this. I'm just going to read it quickly. Okay. The Tzimtzum in Eir Ein Sof remained Hashara. Fine. I explained that to mean that that's the effect of the Tzimtzum Arishan, how it's affecting things going on before the Tzimtzum. That means it affects, that's the scholars. See, the Hainu scholars, we also struggle with what exactly that meant. Fine. So, my understanding is that the sefirot were all encompassed within the Bli Gvul Dika thing, and you needed to have a Tzimtzum, and the Tzimtzum is to conceal that only a nakuda, only a point remains. And that point is called Achrena. That's like a point. In other words, compared to the infinite possibilities of the Eir Bli Gvul, the Hashara B'Keach is one nakuda, is one part, because it's only one possibility. That's the one possibility. Omnom Anukuda Rishena Shishkel is Galas. What's the Omnom here? However, the Nukuda Rishena Shishkel, like here in the Kitzur also, he just said it. That's what sparked this. He said Hashada is Anukuda Legabe Ein Sof, and then he says, but the Nukuda that when it's Nizgala is B'chinas chochma. In other words, when we call the sefirot agnusa Nukuda Malchus Ein Sof, we call it Malchus Ein Sof, the lowest level, compared to the Bligvul. But the first Nukuda that's actually revealed, in other words, in existence, is chochma, which comes, and then he continues, and that's the second Tzimtzum, that's the Tzimtzum that is specific sphere. And then he says, when Nukuda zo yesh b'zeh Tzimtzumim. It's almost like talking about two Tzimtzumim here and two Tzimtzumim here. And he says the same two Tzimtzumim there. So what is exactly going on here? This is, I'm just, being medayik in the Asias here. And then he says, what's Nukuda now? We're talking about Nukuda Chochma, that's already his galus. And this has two Tzimtzum, Tzimtzum Kol Eid Sof, the Hitzel Lag B'chinas. Is this the same thing that he just said in the beginning? No, but he b'chinas hashara now. But he says clearly in the parentheses, he b'chinas hashara now. Hold on. Yeah, but look at the second line on the next page. He says that Tzimtzum, the first Tzimtzum in this Nukuda of Chochma is b'chinas is that he conceals all the energies, and also only this and only that b'chinas tachtein shaber. He's like repeating what he says before, but seemingly on the level of Nukudas HaChochma. He's definitely not saying something new, because he's saying exactly b'chinas tachtein shaber, b'chinas hashara. I'm just pointing it out. It needs a little analysis of how the signon here goes. And I would also say, I would wish I could see the Ksav Yad. If I could get a hold of the original writing of the Rebbe Rashab, I want to see what he wrote the first time and what he wrote the second time. Because remember, this chapter was added later. The chapter numbers were added later. This was a flow before the Kitzurim. This was flowing from the previous chapter. So there's clearly a flow here that I think it looks to me like he added something when he made the chapter. That's my guess. Because I see from the signon there's a certain, I don't know, I don't want to say it's choppy, but it looks like something was added. It doesn't look like it's...
The chronology of Ayin Beis, how did it...
He wrote the whole thing without no beginnings, no ends. Just one flow of ideas. You have no idea where begins the Maimon, where ends the Maimon. One or two places I think he makes a new paragraph, but it's all one paragraph, basically. Then, at some point, before he probably spoke it, or at the time that he delivered it, let's say Shavuos, this he could have written Shvat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Ayin Beis. Came Shavuos, the first night of Shavuos, or the first day, it's not clear. He started saying the Maimer, and sometime around then, he wrote the beginning. No, not Shoshek Dimi, he wrote the beginning, because that was it. Sometime around when he started delivering the next Maimer, the second Maimer Shavuos, he wrote beginnings and ends. And each beginning would start kashas on the pasuk, and then say, understand the kashas, yesh lahagdim, this, and then continued the flow. He added basically. You could see if you look in the back, you see exact picture of what he did. Look on the back page. Hey, I'll show you exactly. I wish we could show it on screen. Okay, you see page Hey. Back page Hey. Okay, page Hey is what you see is exactly how it was written. Pages and pages and pages. Turn the page. Here you see middle there. You see Leil Beis the Chag HaShavuos. Only the beginning. And then it says, yeah. And here he starts saying, Yesh lahagdim tchila, and then you see shita. You see shita, then another shita. Here he added things. This second stage, when he added beginnings and ends, he added pieces that were not there in the first long flow. Then turn the page. Then he gave both of those versions, his original and his additions to a maitik, to a writer, who combined, you see the middle here, the writer combined version 2 and version 1, and he gave it to him, that's the middle, it's not the Rebbe Rashab's Ksav Yad, right here, but around it he added a third time. around what you see on the sides, and so one line in the middle also, the Rebbe Rashab added a third time. It's not over yet, my friends. And then, look at the next page. Fourth time. Here he added prokim and kitzurim. Then he added chapters and summaries.
Also, almost never crossed out.
Yeah. So bottom line is, I seems to me that there must have been some addition here. I may be wrong, but I have to study it again. I just wanted to point it out. My understanding, initial ostensible understanding of it would be what I said earlier, that it's about the effect.
Can I just point out
The effect of the Tzimtzum, one second, the effect of the Tzimtzum edition is such that it caused. You see, the Hashara does not need a Tzimtzum. You don't need, the Ein Sof, believable, does not need
said yourself in the mushrooms. Yes, in his mind, there's infinite.
Right, he has infinite possibilities.
He moves them all away. Removes them all.
No, but he doesn't need to move them away from on his mind level. He needs to move them away because he wants to create something. That's why. He could remain in his imagination and it will remain there.
He wants to focus on one idea.
Why? Because he wants to create something. That's why. Because he wants a piece of art. He wants a tzimtzum. So there's a reason why he wants to focus on one, because there's no way that it's going to emerge as one if it's not focused as one. My understanding is, I stand by my understanding, that Tzimtzum is what actually reveals all these different things happening.
Okay, I just want to point out that
it reveals. You keep going to the letters. I told you it's not words. You have to give me an alternative explanation. Eitz Chaim.
Forget about that now. Just the nekuda. You have the initial with the word nekuda, right? Which nekuda is it? Emergence or not?
No, I know exactly what he's saying. There's a nekuda that's a nekuda. Malchus of Ein Sof is a nekuda compared to the infinite possibilities. The nekuda, he says, however, that comes out begilu. That I understand. That's not the point.
First line here, the nekuda zuyish, but that's the first nekuda. That goes back to the first nekuda.
No, I would not say that. No, I would say that's nekuda chochma. But then it's not, no. So all this about nekuda chochma is what, a maimer musgar?
No, he finishes there, and
no.
Then he goes back to the nekuda zu. He's going back to the first nekuda.
No. Then he wouldn't say it's b'chinas hashara now. It's clear that then he goes back to chochma. No, look at the third line. He's chochma. He's talking about chochma here already. It's for sure.
That's the third line.
No. The third line is chokulim b'chochma sisa. He's talking about chochma. He's talking about the nekuda of chochma here.
That's chochma, the base in essence is agnosis. Yeah. But you see that the flow makes sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. Omnam hanekuda harishenu sheiskul is galis la'achad tzimtzum b'chinas harishenu shebes b'chinas chochma.
Right.
Anyway. I have to study it again, but it's fine. So let's conclude here. So we learned the page Memvav and Memzayin, 46, 47, concluding Maimer Discourse 7, and then we continue on to chapter 29.